Hello everyone, and welcome to this very short video just touching on a few points with respect to the coronavirus and the impacts that that might have on your Skills First contract compliance. Now, the reason that we are doing this webinar is because we have been absolutely inundated with calls and emails from clients requesting guidance on the contract. As you're all aware, there are a lot of changes happening in RTOs in response to the changing circumstances. And one thing that people need to be aware of is what does that mean at a contractual level? So RTOs are mainly concerned about the compliance with respect to record keeping processes, particularly with evidence of participation, and also obviously concerned about the implications on their cash flow if classes are to be cancelled and end dates are to be extended. Another reason that we are running this webinar is because there has been very little guidance from the Department of Education with respect to business processes and compliance with the contract. They are doing a fantastic job in notifying departments and keeping them up to date with respect to policies around how to respond if you have cases of coronavirus in your campuses. But there's obviously some real concern in the industry at the moment about what does this mean for our compliance with our RTO moving forward. It's important to note that we are not the department, and the advice or the discussions that we have here in this session are really to get you thinking about the contract and some considerations that you may have missed. If you should probably take what we say with a grain of salt and make sure that you consider all of the facts in the context of your organisation. Make sure you reference the contract and supporting documentation before making any decisions regarding business process changes. We'd also advise that you confirm any questions that you may have with the department via the SVTS inquiries line. They have set up a dedicated inquiry status for the coronavirus inquiries. I want to start by starting at the student journey, which is the pre-training review, pre-enrollment process. So when you enroll those students, you go through that pre-training review process. It's an assessment of that student's suitability for their intended program. And you conducted this assessment at the time of enrollment, which may have been a week ago, or it may have been 6 months or 12 months ago. Now the situation has rapidly changed, and your delivery and assessment methods and the support mechanisms that you offer students are also rapidly changing. And they're changing now, and in a week's time, they might change again. So you really need to consider what that means from a pre-training review point of view, because obviously students enroll into a program under a certain assumption, and you deem them suitable for a program based on that assessment that you made 6 or 12 months ago. So we recommend that you start to think about some of these considerations. So the first one there is, did the student sign up for a program that included mandatory online components? And if they didn't, would they feel comfortable engaging through online methods? And that's really important because students need to have that transparency with respect to what they're required to do in terms of engagement, training and assessment. And if you are going to change your engagement methods to include online activities, have you screened your students for digital capabilities at the point of that pre-training review assessment? And if that's something that you weren't capturing at that point because you were running a completely paper-based, face-to-face delivery and assessment mode, then you need to consider perhaps going back to those students before you start changing the goalposts on them and making sure that they have those capabilities. You should probably also ask your students whether or not they have reliable access to internet and computer hardware as well. And if they do they have software on their computer which allows them to access your portals and engage in online online delivery and assessment via programs that might require certain system requirements. You should also ask yourself how you will treat students who cannot engage online. So if you have cohorts who don't necessarily have access to internet or don't have a computer that's able to support the software programs that you're looking at using to engage with students. How are you going to support those students in the event that you can't run face-to-face classes? Okay, so some examples there might be running one-on-one trainer phone conversations to continue the momentum, or sending out printed student packs where they can work through some theory work from home and also engage with the trainer via phone. And then finally, how will you document digital capabilities? So again, going back to that original pre-training review assessment, if that's something that you do have to capture again, how are you going to document that in the student file? Training and assessment strategies is another consideration you'll have to make. So you have your TAS documents, which are built on the back of extensive industry feedback and your intrinsic knowledge of the target cohort. You've formulated those delivery and assessment methods in that TAS based on these learner capabilities and needs. So what happens when you change those delivery and assessment methods mid-course? We recommend that you consider the following. Students may not have enrolled into a program with the expectation of engaging online. Your delivery periods for units of competency also may need to change based on these new engagement methods. So it may be a case of extending the expected delivery times for units of competency because there's potentially a lower frequency of engagement, or you're not able to, say, get 8 hours of classroom-based content done, and you have to break up that standard day of delivery into, say, 3 or 4 bite-sized chunks of online delivery. You may also need to provide systems and software training to students and staff before rolling out new processes as well. And I think that's really important. We can't just turn around and start pulling in software subscriptions and expecting students to engage with trainers through webinar software like Zoom without providing them first with some proper training on how to utilize those programs. You may need to run PD sessions for trainers who are now potentially required to deliver and assess online. And this is actually a contractual requirement for Skills First providers regarding online delivery. So you do need to consult the contract with respect to that, and you really should consider what that means for trainers who are perhaps accustomed to face-to-face delivery and paper-based assessment processes, who are then being thrown in the deep end into online delivery and assessment. And you should definitely go back at and review your original training and assessment strategy and make changes perhaps based on those new engagement methods, particularly if you think that this is something that you're going to start doing moving forward. Skills First Teacher Notes is another area of the contract that we wanted to touch on, and Skills First Teacher Notes sit within the Evidence of Participation clause, which is Schedule 1, Clause 11.5. So teacher notes based on communication between a Skills First teacher and the student, and this is directly from the contract, establishing the eligible individual's involvement in the learning and/or assessment activity of the unit of competency. So what does that mean? That means it could include personal interviews, telephone conversations, email exchanges, or other modes of engagement in learning and assessment activity. Those other modes could include things like online classroom webinars, so I mentioned Zoom software before, or it could be a Skype meeting or something similar, e-learning activities via an LMS, or online assessments. How do we document evidence of participation with respect to the contract? Regardless of your form of engagement, you must remember to record EOP correctly. And this is something that in 12 months' time, when an auditor comes in and starts to look at your evidence of engagement, perhaps we should all expect that there may be some leniency granted down the track with respect to audits because of the unique circumstances, but we can't guarantee that, and we need to assume that we have to have that evidence available at audit in the future. So as a minimum, we would recommend that you consider the evidence of student engagement. So that could be online audit logs from your LMS demonstrating a unique student login. It could be the student name and ID recorded against attendance sheet. It could be recording or audit extract from online webinar, or it could be training documents or about engagement. So a couple of ways that we've helped staff here is comply with these requirements is, for example, training enrollments and enter into a student management system that has a timestamped note record keeping process, or making sure that when you are conducting face-to-face webinars, that you still make the effort to get the trainer to record attendance, whether it's a roll call process, and document that attendance sheet separate to the webinar recording so that you've got that EOP. Making sure, obviously, that that EOP maps to the unit of competency. Again, we'd recommend that you have that attendance sheet with the qual code and title, the unit codes and title, and also the date and time of engagement. And then finally with that assessor or trainer sign off. Communication is going to be critical over the coming months, not just with respect to your students, but also with your staff. So you should regularly be updating your student base and staff via a number of communication methods, whether it's a learner portal or LMS notification, regular emails, written letters or printed letters that are posted out to students, text messaging services, whatever works best for your student cohorts. You need to make sure that you keep that line of communication open at all times. In your communication with students, you should make the following information very clear. What is your position on face-to-face engagement? And I understand that that would be a daily proposition. That's something that's going to change even down to an hourly basis, but you need to make it very clear to students. Are classes still happening? Will classes happen tomorrow? What will happen when classes are cancelled? How will we communicate with you? What is the appropriate phone line or email address that students should use to communicate with your organisation? So if you're taking traditionally classroom-based students and sending them home and telling them to engage with trainers via online methods, who do they turn to for support and advice? Which phone line do they call? Who do they ask for? Who do they email? How do they communicate with their trainer if classes are cancelled? So are you willing to give a trainer email out to students if you haven't already? Can the trainer call students on their phone? Can students call the trainer? These are all things that you need to consider. And also, what student support mechanisms have you put in place in addition to what you already have in your business for supporting students in continuing their studies remotely? Because if there's any opportunity whatsoever to continue the momentum and continue training and engaging with students over the course of the next couple of months, then we strongly recommend that you do everything in your power to make that happen. As you know, with end dates through SVTS claims, if you stop training and you suspend classes and you suspend engagement and you have to extend those end dates out indefinitely, it's going to have serious consequences on your cash flow. So any alternative engagement methods that you can create whilst also complying with the contract are strongly recommended. Some other miscellaneous questions and considerations, questions that you should ask yourself. Students in regional areas that attract a regional loading of 1.1 times the base amount. This loading does not apply to online delivery or distance education. So that might be something that you want to consider long-term if you're going to rapidly change the way you engage with students. It's worth noting that that regional loading does not apply to online delivery. You have to ask yourself, should you update your reported delivery modes where course delivery has changed dramatically? So at a unit of competency level where you're reporting internal or external or workplace-based delivery modes, does that need to change in your event misreporting? Now, before jumping to into your system and making those changes, it might be worth just assessing first how much are we going to change of this course delivery? Is this a temporary thing or a long-term thing? And then maybe seek some clarification from the department on whether or not you need to make those changes. And then obviously extending end dates I mentioned before is going to have a significant impact on cash flow. And so we really want to make sure that we can find those alternative ways to engage with students to keep that student progress going. We understand that that's not always going to be the case. There'll be times where if you're delivering, for example, children's services programs or aged care programs that have many units of competency linked to a placement or practical outcome, that there are going to be occasions where you just simply cannot finalise units of competency without that practical evidence, which you may not be in a position to obtain at this stage. But you can certainly look at readjusting program delivery, looking at covering off more theory-based activities during this period, so that when we get to a point where things settle down and we can start engaging and heading back into facilities for practical placement, that we're in a position to take advantage of that. And then also managing a remote workforce. So how do you achieve this? How much will it cost your business? There are so many considerations to make around sending staff home to work from home. Considerations such as what type of home setup do they have? Have you provided them with enough materials to support them from working from home, such as access to data, for internet access, phone allowances if they have to start calling students off their personal phone? Do they have a safe working environment at home where they can set up a screen and laptop? And then what costs are associated with that? What do you have to purchase to support your staff through that process? What online subscriptions do you need to make to allow staff to start engaging with students online? And I think that is probably a short webinar in itself, and we may look at running another or a series of these webinars where we talk about remote workforces and perhaps online delivery and assessment in more detail. So what should you do next? Well, if you want to look at it and take silver lining approach, there's a unique opportunity here for your organisation to focus on building flexible online processes for engagement and support for the future. So there is an opportunity to take advantage of this downtime and focus on streamlining some of those business processes. You should do the following at a minimum. You should discuss internally, if you haven't already, what your organisation's response will be to classroom closures in the event that occurs. You should build a strategy and share the relevant components of that strategy with your students through formal communication methods. You should consider sharing your strategy with the department. We would recommend that if you're going to make some serious decisions about changes to delivery and things like that, that it might be nice just to give the Department of Education an FYI that, hey, this is what we're looking at doing. You should certainly keep students and staff up to date with the changes to your strategy. Your strategy is going to be extremely agile and will change potentially on a daily basis. And so you need to make sure you've got lines of communication to staff and students to keep them up to date with those changes. You should focus on building processes for how you and your staff will engage with students virtually if you haven't already. And you need to make sure that you get that balance right between rolling out an alternative process in a timely manner, but also not rushing into the wrong decision. It's very easy when you start to implement online solutions or online engagement that you can make the wrong decision. And ensure that your staff are well equipped and supported to work remotely. I mentioned that before, and I think that's something that we might cover off in a separate session. And then finally, what we wanted to to do is to say that, in these uncertain times, it can be beneficial just to talk through some of those ideas and bounce ideas off someone else. And if that's something that you want to do, then RTLogic is going to offer a free consultation service to RTOs that are affected through a phone hookup or Zoom meeting. So if that's something that you want to do, it's completely obligation free. There's no hidden agenda. It's just a free 15-minute consultation service. Jump into our calendar, click on the date and time that you want, select whether you want us to call you or you want to organise a Zoom session, and then talk to us about anything you want. Ask us any questions, and we'll be more than happy to help. So thank you very much for watching that. If you've got any questions, feel free to take advantage of that service. And if not, good luck and all the best over the coming months.